Hi, my name is Chloe. I came home from a double shift at the small hospital where I work as a nurse, bone-tired, hands stiff from 14 hours of emergencies. All I wanted was to wrap my arms around my kids, Ethan and Sophie, make us hot cocoa and let the day fade away. That picture in my mind had kept me going since noon. But when I pushed open the door to our little house, I knew something was wrong. The air smelled faintly of my sister Vanessa's perfume, a floral, powdery scent I hadn't smelled in this hallway for years. She never came unannounced. Even when she did visit, it was always short, hurried, and laced with judgment. And yet tonight, her scent lingered. The living room was strangely quiet. No cartoons humming from the television. No running feet charging toward me yelling, "Mom!" Just silence, heavy and wrong. I dropped my keys on the counter and whispered into the air, "Ethan? Sophie?" No answer. The hallway light flickered as I walked toward their bedroom. I placed my hand on the doorknob, already smiling, ready to see them in pajamas, maybe giggling under the covers. But when I swung the door open, my smile froze. The room was empty. The beds were gone. The bright quilt my daughter had picked out, missing. The little desk where Ethan kept his Lego sets, cleared away. Even the lamp in the corner had vanished. The walls looked bare, stripped, like no child had ever lived there. My throat tightened. From behind me came the slow, measured sound of footsteps, and then her voice, flat, almost bored. "It's where you belong, Chloe, or you can get out." I turned. My mother, Margaret, stood there, arms folded, lips pressed thin. She stared at me as if she hadn't just turned my children's world upside down. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, though my heart already knew. "The girls need a proper room," she said. "Vanessa's daughter starts school next month. She deserves the space. Your two can manage downstairs. It'll build character." Her words struck me like cold water. Downstairs meant the basement, damp, dark, with peeling cement walls and the smell of mildew. Before I could answer, small footsteps pattered in the hallway. Ethan appeared, hair sticking up from sleep, eyes wide. He clung to my leg the way he used to when he was little. Sophie peeked around my hip, clutching the edge of my coat. "Mommy," she asked, her voice trembling, "where are our stuffed animals?" I knelt down, kissed the top of her head, and forced a steady voice. "They're safe, sweetheart. Don't worry." But inside, my chest ached. Margaret's gaze stayed cold. "You should be grateful I even let you stay here. Plenty of single mothers don't have a roof over their heads." Her words echoed as if the hallway itself had turned against me. I took my children's hands and walked past her without answering. We went down the narrow staircase into the basement. The light bulb buzzed weakly when I pulled the chain. What I saw made my stomach twist. Trash bags stacked against the wall, mattresses leaning in the corner, half covered with blankets. The smell of damp concrete filled the air. This was not a place for anyone to live. I brushed my hand over one of the bags and felt the shape of Ethan's favorite toy truck under the plastic. My jaw clenched. I had worked double shifts, sacrificed holidays, sold jewelry to save money, just so my children could have a safe, steady home. And now here we were, reduced to basement storage, while upstairs glowed with fairy lights and fresh paint for my niece. I laid blankets on the floor, trying to soften the hardness of the concrete. Ethan and Sophie curled up together, their eyes searching mine for reassurance. "This won't be forever," I whispered, smoothing Sophie's hair. Ethan's voice was quiet. "How long is forever, Mom?" I swallowed. Not long enough to matter. But my own voice shook. I wanted to cry, to scream, to storm upstairs and demand our place back. But one look at their faces reminded me they didn't need my anger. They needed my strength. I tucked them in as best I could, kissed their foreheads, and promised to bring another blanket. Upstairs, the sound of laughter drifted from what used to be the guest room. I stopped in the hallway, unseen. Through the open door, I saw Vanessa spinning her little girl around in a new canopy bed, pink desk in the corner, fairy lights glowing. My mother stood by, smiling proudly, her eyes shining as if this were the grandest gift she had ever given. "She finally has the room she deserves," Margaret said, voice dripping with approval. And then she added, without a shred of shame, "Poor Chloe's kids are adaptable." They all laughed. I stood frozen, memorizing that picture. My mother and sister glowing with joy while my children lay on damp concrete downstairs. I turned away before they could see the tears stinging my eyes. That night, when the house grew quiet, I sat in the basement with my old leather planner, the same one I'd used back in nursing school when every dollar was counted and every shift felt like survival. I didn't write about pain. I didn't write about betrayal. I wrote a list. Step 1, gather proof. Step 2, make a plan. Step 3, never let them take from us again. Because this wasn't just about losing a room, it was about losing our place in their world. And I wasn't about to let that happen, not without a fight. The next morning, the house smelled of pancakes. That alone told me something was wrong. Margaret never cooked breakfast for my children, not once. She would barely even glance at them when we shared the kitchen. But now the sweet scent of batter drifted down to the basement, almost mocking in its warmth. I pulled myself up from the thin pile of blankets. Sophie was still curled against Ethan, their breaths soft, their bodies shivering in the cool basement air. I watched them for a moment, my chest tightening. Children shouldn't have to sleep like this. I climbed the stairs slowly, careful not to wake them. The closer I got to the kitchen, the more I heard clinking plates, Vanessa's laughter, my niece's voice high and excited. When I stepped in, Margaret stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. She turned to me with a smile so wide it looked painted on. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, as if last night hadn't happened. "Morning," I replied carefully, setting my mug on the counter. Vanessa sat at the table with her daughter, chatting about school supplies and new backpacks. Their plates were stacked high with golden pancakes, syrup dripping down the sides. Margaret slid another plate across the counter toward me. "Thought the kids might like something warm before school." I didn't touch it. Instead, I leaned against the counter and watched as she poured orange juice, fussed over napkins, and asked my niece about her favorite toppings. Ethan shuffled in, rubbing his eyes, Sophie trailing behind him. They froze when they saw the scene, their grandmother smiling, their aunt laughing, their cousin enjoying the feast. Margaret's voice turned syrupy sweet. "Come sit down, darlings. I made these just for you." Ethan glanced at me, his brow furrowed. Sophie clutched my arm tighter. I nodded once, signaling it was okay. They slid into their chairs, wary but hungry. I watched silently as Margaret served them, cutting pancakes into neat pieces, pouring extra syrup, acting like she'd been their doting grandmother all along. When everyone's plates were full, she finally sat across from me, folding her hands neatly on the table. Her smile was still fixed, but her eyes told the truth. "You know," she began, "maybe it's time for a fresh start. Keep the family close." There it was, the real reason for the sudden warmth. She glanced at Vanessa's daughter, then back to me. "You and the kids could move into that smaller room upstairs. Cozier, easier to keep warm. And..." She paused for effect. "Since times are tough, maybe you could help out a little. Just a small rent, nothing unreasonable." I gripped my mug tighter. "And of course," she added lightly, "you could watch your sister's little girl a few days a week. Daycare is so expensive and you're already here." Every word felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. The memories came fast. Years ago, when Vanessa had her baby, it was me who stayed up night after night, bottle feeding in the living room while Vanessa went out with friends. It was me who canceled job interviews because someone just needed me for a few hours. It was me who missed Ethan's 5th birthday because I was babysitting her daughter at the last minute. And here we were again, Margaret smiling, Vanessa smirking, both of them ready to chain me back into that same role. I took a deep breath. It sounds like you've thought this through. Margaret's smile widened, pleased with herself. Of course, we all just need to help each other. You know, family. I met her gaze. Then let's put it in writing. That way, everything's clear. The flicker in her eyes was quick, but I caught it. She hadn't expected that. Oh, there's no need to make it formal, she said, her voice suddenly lighter. We're family. We don't need papers between us. I'd feel better if we did, I replied softly, for everyone's sake. She hesitated, then gave a small laugh, the kind that masked discomfort. All right, if it makes you comfortable. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up and excused herself, stepping into the hallway. I turned my focus back to the children. I cut Sophie's pancake into smaller pieces, poured Ethan a little more juice. My ears, though, stayed sharp. From the hallway, her voice dropped low. I talked to her. Looks like we'll get free help again. You can bring the baby over next week. My stomach twisted. On the other end of the line, Vanessa's laugh echoed, smug and satisfied. I forced my face into neutrality before Margaret walked back in, pretending nothing had been said. She carried on pouring more coffee, asking Ethan about school like nothing was wrong. When breakfast ended, Ethan looked up at me as we cleared the plates. Are we moving upstairs, Mom? I ruffled his hair, keeping my voice steady. We might be moving, buddy, just not the way they think. Because I had already decided. This wasn't going to end with us shoved into another tiny room, burdened with babysitting, paying rent for a home I had already invested my life savings into. This time, I wasn't bending. I was going to fight. That night, after tucking Ethan and Sophie back into their makeshift beds in the basement, I sat by the dim lamp under the stairs. I opened my leather planner again. The list stared back at me. Step 1. Gather proof. I tapped my pen against the paper. My mind retraced every corner of this house, every hidden box, every drawer where papers had been shoved over the years. I knew exactly where to start. Up in the attic, there was a metal filing box buried under folded quilts. My father's handwriting still lingered on old envelopes, his records precise. If I could find what I remembered, it would be more than memory. It would be proof. I looked over at my children, their faces peaceful in sleep despite the hard floor beneath them. Margaret and Vanessa thought they had won by moving us downstairs. But what they didn't realize was that in doing so, they had redrawn the lines. They had turned a quiet daughter into an opponent. And I wasn't about to lose this fight. I woke before the sun. The basement air was damp, heavy with the smell of concrete and detergent from the folded blankets. Ethan's arm was draped over Sophie, his small body curled protectively around his sister. The sight filled me with equal parts pride and sorrow. No child should have to become a shield. I eased myself up quietly, careful not to disturb them. Today was the day I started taking control. Upstairs, the house was silent. Even the pipes seemed to hold their breath. I slipped on socks to keep my steps soft and padded into the narrow hallway where the attic ladder waited. The metal latch groaned when I tugged it down, the sound too loud in the quiet house. I froze, heart hammering, listening for movement. Nothing. I climbed quickly, the wooden steps creaking under my weight. The attic air wrapped around me like a blanket of dust and memory. It smelled of cedar and mothballs, of cardboard that had soaked up decades of summers and winters. Thin lines of sunlight streamed through a grimy window, catching particles of dust that floated like tiny ghosts. Stacks of boxes filled the space, each labeled in my mother's sharp handwriting, Christmas 2005, linens, photo albums. I scanned the labels, following a faint memory. Near the back, under a pile of folded quilts, I spotted a dented metal box. Its gray surface was cold against my fingers as I dragged it out. My breath quickened. This was it. I clicked open the latch. Inside lay layers of papers, worn thin, edges yellowed with time, receipts, old bills, mortgage slips. I flipped through carefully, my fingers trembling, and then my eyes froze on one page. It was an agreement, nearly 8 years old, with my signature in blue ink. The amount stared back at me. $38,000 paid in full from my savings account. The memory hit like a punch. I was fresh off my divorce, still raw, scraping by with 2 small kids. Margaret had been desperate, days away from losing the house. She'd sat at the kitchen table sobbing, promising me over and over that if I helped, the house would always be my safe place. And I believed her. My throat tightened. Digging deeper, I found an envelope tucked into a side pocket of the box. The paper was yellowed at the edges, my father's looping script across the front. I slid the letter out with shaking hands. It was short, almost casual, but one sentence stopped me cold. Chloe is the rightful co-owner of this home, and I trust she will be treated as such. The words blurred through my tears. My father's voice felt close again, his steady hand on my shoulder, the one person who had ever truly seen me. I didn't waste a second. I pulled out my phone, snapping photos of every page, every signature. I uploaded them to my private cloud, then immediately forwarded them to Janet, my oldest friend, the one person I trusted without hesitation. "Keep these safe," I texted. "Copies off the cloud, just in case." Her reply was instant. "Got them. You're covered." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. I had proof. I was sliding the papers back into the box when footsteps creaked on the floor below. My body stiffened. Margaret's voice floated up, soft, almost sing-song. "Ethan, Sophie, breakfast is ready, darlings." My pulse quickened. She never cooked for them, ever. That meant she wanted something. I shoved the box back under the quilts, climbed down the ladder, and forced a light laugh when I saw her at the base of the stairs. "Just organizing old holiday stuff," I said evenly, "before the day gets busy." She smiled, but her eyes lingered on me longer than they should have. In the kitchen, she was at the stove again, flipping pancakes as if she were some version of herself I'd never known. Her voice was sugar-coated, her movements precise. She served Ethan and Sophie, fussing over them, pouring juice, asking about school. She never asked before. This was a performance, a setup, and I knew it. Once the kids were eating, she sat across from me. "You know," she began lightly, "maybe it's time we formalize things. Since you'll be staying here, perhaps a little rent contribution would be fair. Just something small." I forced myself to stay calm. "If that's what you want, we'll need it in writing." Her smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. "Oh, Chloe," she chuckled, "no need to make things so official. We're family." I tilted my head, voice steady. Exactly why it should be clear, for everyone's sake. Her phone buzzed again. She excused herself, stepping into the hallway. I leaned closer to Ethan and Sophie, cutting their pancakes, smiling as if nothing were wrong. But my ears tuned to her voice just out of sight. "She bought it," Margaret whispered. "We'll get the help again. Vanessa, bring the baby next week." The blood rushed in my ears. So that was their plan. Trap me into paying rent, caring for Vanessa's child, and erase my stake in the house I had saved. By the time Margaret returned, my expression was smooth, calm. I thanked her politely, helped the kids finish breakfast, and cleared the dishes. Ethan's eyes searched mine. "Are we really moving upstairs, Mom?" I ruffled his hair. "We might be moving, sweetheart, but not the way they think." Because now I had proof, and with proof came power. That night, when the house quieted, I opened my planner again at the desk shoved under the basement stairs. The lamplight glowed on the pages. Step 1, done. Proof secured. Step 2, make copies. Keep them safe. Step 3, find more. The attic had given me my father's words, but I needed more than sentiment. I needed records the community couldn't ignore, which meant going into enemy territory, the bank, the place where every mortgage slip, every payment, every joint account lived. I closed the planner, slid it back into my bag, and looked at my children sleeping nearby. Sophie clutched her stuffed rabbit, Ethan's hand resting protectively on her shoulder. Margaret thought she had pushed us into the basement, but what she had really done was push me into action. This wasn't just about walls and rooms anymore. This was about truth, about dignity, about giving my children a future that wasn't chained to my mother's manipulations or Vanessa's demands. For years, I'd stayed silent. For years, I told myself patience was survival. Not anymore. Now I had the first pieces of my arsenal, and soon I would have the rest. Because if Margaret and Vanessa wanted a fight, they were about to learn that I had no intention of losing. 2 days later, I came home to find Margaret standing on the porch. She didn't look like a mother waiting to welcome her daughter home. She looked like a gatekeeper, blocking the way, a manila envelope clutched in her hand. Her arms were crossed, her mouth set in a line that told me she'd already decided how this would go. "We can do this the easy way, Chloe," she said calmly, "or we can do it the hard way." Her tone was too smooth, the kind of calm that usually comes just before a storm. My eyes dropped to the envelope. "What's in that?" I asked, though I could already guess. "A legal notice," she replied, drawing out the words as though she savored them. "You have 72 hours to vacate this property. Signed by the county clerk." She gave the envelope a little shake, so the papers inside rustled like a taunt. I took it from her hands, feeling how light it was, too thin to carry anything real. My fingers slid the papers out. One glance told me everything. The seal was wrong. The font was oversized. The county's name misspelled with an extra letter. It was sloppy, an imitation of authority. "This is interesting," I murmured, keeping my voice even. "Nothing to think about," Margaret snapped. "It's time to grow up, stop freeloading, and let the real owners handle this house." Before I could answer, she pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. "Let's loop in your sister so she can hear this too." Seconds later, Vanessa's voice came through the speaker, loud and smug. "I told you, Chloe, this isn't your home anymore. You've been coasting long enough." From inside the house, I heard the sound of small footsteps. Ethan appeared at the doorway, his brow furrowed, eyes filled with confusion. "Mom?" he asked softly. "Are we moving again?" The question cut straight through me. I crouched down so I was eye level with him. I put a hand on his shoulder. "No, sweetheart, we're not going anywhere." My voice was steady, even though my hands trembled with the effort to hold it together. Vanessa's voice cut in again through the speaker. "You're dragging this out for no reason. Just leave before it gets ugly." I stood slowly, straightening my back, meeting Margaret's eyes. I let a smile creep across my face, one she didn't expect. "Thanks for bringing this to me in person," I said evenly. "I'll have my attorney review it first thing in the morning." Margaret's expression faltered just for a second. She hadn't expected me to have a counter ready. "You don't need an attorney," Vanessa snapped through the speaker. "I think I do," I replied, sliding the papers neatly back into the envelope. "And while we're at it, maybe the county clerk would like to see this fascinating document." Silence crackled through the line. Margaret muttered something under her breath, turned, and walked down the steps. Vanessa hung up without saying goodbye. The porch grew quiet again. I stepped inside, closed the door, and leaned against it. My kids hovered nearby, wide-eyed, having heard more than I wanted them to. I set the envelope on the kitchen table, pulled out my phone, and called Janet. "Sending you some photos," I said, my voice tight. "Tell me what you see." A minute later, her laugh crackled through the line. "Oh, this is bad for them. That's not even close to a legal notice. You could call it harassment, maybe even intimidation." "Good," I said softly, "because I've got more." I opened my bag and pulled out the copies from the bank. the records showing my $38,000 down payment, my name on the ownership drafts, the account withdrawals with Vanessa's electronic signature. "You're sitting on a gold mine of leverage, Chloe," Janet said. "If we play this right, they won't see it coming." For the first time in weeks, I felt the balance tilt, even just slightly, in my favor. But Margaret and Vanessa weren't done, not by a long shot. It began 3 mornings later. My phone buzzed nonstop on the nightstand, a flood of vibrations that rattled the wood. Blinking against the pale light slipping through the blinds, I reached for it. Dozens of notifications stacked one after another. Facebook, community groups, even messages from old high school acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in decades. I opened the first one. At the top of the screen was Vanessa's name, bold and self-righteous. She had written a long post, practically an essay about me. "She's been living off my parents for years," it began. "We took her in when she had nothing. And this is how she thanks us, spreading lies to make herself look like a victim." My heart pounded as I scrolled. She had attached photos, old ones from 10 years ago, when Ethan and Sophie were toddlers, when we'd lived in a tiny rental with mismatched furniture, scraped together after my divorce. One picture showed them sitting on the floor eating cereal out of plastic bowls, bare walls in the background. Her caption, "This is how she raised them, like squatters, and now she pretends she's the one who helped us." The comments came in waves. Some people jumped to her defense. "Wow, if that's true, that's disgusting." Others chimed in with pity for her side. "Poor Vanessa, always cleaning up her sister's mess." My stomach turned, not from shame, but from anger. Scrolling further, I saw Margaret had joined the pile-on. "It breaks my heart as a mother," she wrote, "but Chloe has been ungrateful since she was a teenager. We gave her everything, and this is how she repays us." Names I recognized filled the thread: neighbors, co-workers, even distant relatives. Half of them swallowed the story whole. The other half hesitated, confused, unsure, but already infected by doubt. I didn't hear Ethan come into the room until he spoke. "Mom," he said, holding his phone out with shaking hands, "why is Aunt Vanessa saying we lived like squatters? That we were freeloading?" His voice was sharp, more angry than hurt. Sophie trailed in behind him, her eyes wet with tears. "Is it true, Mommy? Did we really live like that?" I put my phone down, pulled them both close, and held them tightly. "No, baby. What she's doing is twisting the truth to make herself look better. And this is the last time anyone is going to speak about you like that without answering for it." Ethan pulled back, his jaw set. "Then do something. Don't just let her talk like that." "Oh, I will," I whispered, smoothing Sophie's hair. "But we're going to do it the right way." After they left the room, I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone still buzzing beside me. It was like a swarm of gnats, endless and irritating. Every instinct told me to swat back immediately, to fire off my own post, to shout the truth. But the smarter part of me knew better. I dialed Janet. She answered on the second ring. "I saw it," she said, without me even saying hello. "And she's stupid for posting it. Screenshots, Chloe. Every comment, every share. The timing's perfect. Right after the HOA meeting. This isn't just petty. It's textbook defamation." "I was thinking the same thing," I said, pacing the room. "If I hit back now, they'll start deleting. But if I give it a day—" "Exactly," Janet interrupted. "Let her dig her own hole. The more she posts, the better your case." I ended the call, set my coffee to brew, and opened my laptop. A new folder labeled in clean capital letters, Evidence. One by one, I saved screenshots, Vanessa's captions, Margaret's comments, threads of neighbors whispering, sharing, piling on. By noon, I had over 40 images saved. By nightfall, the folder had doubled. This wasn't just their noise anymore. This was ammunition. By the end of the week, I had a stack of proof that could bury them, or save them, depending on what I chose to do. And I knew one thing for certain. If they wanted to play this game in public, then public was exactly where I would answer them. Saturday morning arrived cold and sharp, the kind of morning where the air nips at your cheeks and your breath hangs in thin clouds. I pulled into the community center's parking lot with my leather folder pressed against my chest. Inside were neatly stacked copies of everything I had collected: bank records, certified mortgage slips, and the photograph of the forged eviction notice. Janet was already waiting near the side entrance, blending in with a cluster of people, chatting and sipping coffee from paper cups. She caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod, steady, calm, just enough to say, "I'm here. You're not alone." I swallowed hard, clutching the folder tighter, and walked inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Folding chairs scraped against the floor as neighbors shuffled into rows. The faint smell of burnt coffee drifted from the refreshment table. The HOA chair, Mr. Phillips, sat at the front with his papers neatly stacked, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. I slid into a seat near the middle, Janet beside me. People glanced my way, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. I felt the weight of their stares. Many had seen Vanessa's posts, read Margaret's comments, whispered their judgments in grocery aisles. My palms were damp, my heart unsteady. Mr. Phillips droned through the usual agenda: landscaping updates, parking complaints, the dull rhythm of bureaucracy. My thoughts raced. My folder felt heavy in my lap, like it carried not just papers but my entire future. Then came the words I'd been waiting for. "Community concerns," he announced. I rose to my feet, smoothing my coat with one hand, folder clutched in the other. My voice, when it came, was steady. "I have something I need to bring to everyone's attention. It concerns misuse of property rights and fraudulent documentation." The words landed like a stone in still water. Heads turned. A murmur rippled through the room. I walked toward the front, each step slow, deliberate. When I reached the table, I set my folder down and opened it with care. "This," I said, holding up the eviction notice, "was delivered to my home 3 days ago. It claims to be an official order from the county clerk, giving me 72 hours to vacate the property." Gasps fluttered through the room. I handed it to Mr. Phillips. "Can anyone here confirm whether this is a legitimate county seal?" I asked. He adjusted his glasses, studied it for a moment, then frowned. "Number, this isn't right. Wrong seal entirely." A low murmur spread through the rows. People leaned toward one another, whispering. I let the silence hang for a beat before laying the notice flat on the table. "It was presented as official," I continued, "and it came from my own family." Faces shifted. Some hardened with disapproval. Others softened with sympathy. I could see people remembering the gossip, the freeloader label, the sideways glances they had cast over the years. "That's not all," I said, pulling out the mortgage documents. My hands didn't shake. "This is the purchase record for my home, notarized and filed. My name is on every page. I didn't squat. I paid for this house with my savings." I held the pages high enough for those in the back to see. Mrs. Alvarez, sitting 2 rows up, leaned forward with a sharp intake of breath. Mr. Reading, who had always muttered about me under his breath at meetings, folded his arms, frowning as if reconsidering. I placed the papers on the table, each one a stone in the foundation I was rebuilding, and then the doors banged open. Margaret strode in, coat half-buttoned, hair windblown, Vanessa trailing close behind. Their eyes darted around the room, their faces flushed with anger. "Don't listen to her," Vanessa blurted before even reaching the seats. "She's lying, twisting everything to make herself look like a victim." I didn't flinch. "You're welcome to speak during your turn," I said evenly, then looked back to the chair. "I'll be submitting the full file to your office tomorrow for review. If the county clerk wants it too, I'm happy to provide copies." "That won't be necessary," Margaret snapped, but her voice carried an edge, too quick, too sharp. I gathered my papers slowly, deliberately. Then I looked out at the rows of familiar faces. People who had seen me grow up in this neighborhood, people who thought they knew the story. And if anyone here would like to see the rest of the transactions, I added, they're time-stamped and notarized, every withdrawal, every signature, all documented. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint shuffle of papers. Mr. Phillips cleared his throat. "Thank you, Ms. Walker. We'll make sure this is entered into the record." I nodded once, then stepped back from the table. Janet's eyes met mine as I returned to my seat. She didn't smile, didn't clap. She gave me the same small, approving glance she had given outside, the kind that said, "You landed it. You did exactly what you needed to do." Margaret and Vanessa didn't stay long. They left in a swirl of perfume and muttered complaints, their heels clicking sharply against the tile. As they passed, neighbors leaned in to whisper. Some frowned. Others exchanged knowing looks. By the time the meeting adjourned, the current had begun to shift. People I had known for years, but never truly spoken to, gave me small nods. A few murmured, "Good night, Chloe," in tones that carried something more than politeness. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the first real crack in the wall they had built around me. I walked out into the crisp air, the folder clutched against my chest. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and rose. My breath came steady, not rushed, not panicked. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't walking alone. Ethan and Sophie were waiting for me at Janet's car, just like we'd planned. Ethan's small grin spread across his face the second he saw me, and Sophie ran to wrap her arms around my waist. "Did they listen, Mom?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide. "They did," I said softly, brushing a curl from Sophie's cheek. "And it's only the beginning." We walked together toward the car, the weight of weeks of silence and slander lifting from my shoulders, little by little. Behind me, the community center's lights flickered on, illuminating the parking lot where Margaret and Vanessa stood off to the side, their heads bent close together. They didn't look at me as I passed, and I didn't look at them. Because this time, I didn't need to explain myself. The truth was no longer mine alone to carry. It was out there, in the open, where it belonged. And for the first time in years, I knew. They weren't the only ones with power anymore. The week after the community meeting felt like living on borrowed peace. Neighbors who used to avoid me now paused to chat in the driveway. Mrs. Alvarez even dropped off a basket of muffins for the kids. The whispers had shifted. People were starting to question Margaret's and Vanessa's version of events. But silence from my mother and sister didn't mean surrender. It meant they were planning something. And I was right. It happened on a Wednesday evening. I came home from the grocery store with Ethan and Sophie trailing behind me, their backpacks bumping against their shoulders, when I noticed the lights blazing inside the house, every lamp, every overhead bulb flooding the windows with harsh yellow light. My stomach tightened. Margaret was at the dining table when we walked in. The table was covered in neat stacks of paper. Vanessa stood beside her, arms crossed, a smile that wasn't a smile playing at her lips. "Chloe," Margaret said, her tone almost cheerful, "we've made some decisions." The words landed like stones in my chest. I set the grocery bags down slowly. "Decisions about what?" "About the house," Vanessa answered quickly, leaning forward. "Mom's signing over full control to me. That way we can finally handle this place properly. You know, fix it up, make it livable." Margaret slid a set of papers across the table. "All you need to do is sign here, sweetheart. This will release your claims. In exchange, you'll get 3 months to find somewhere else." I didn't touch the papers. Instead, I looked at them. Really looked. My mother, with her forced calm, and my sister, smug and triumphant. They thought they'd cornered me. Thought I'd be too tired, too worn down, too desperate to refuse. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and folded my hands on the table. "Do you know what forgery is?" I asked softly. Vanessa blinked, thrown off. "What are you talking about?" "Forgery," I repeated, like creating a fake eviction notice and passing it off as real. Margaret stiffened. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. I leaned forward. Because the county clerk has already seen your little masterpiece, he wasn't impressed. The air grew thick. You think you're clever, Margaret hissed, dropping the false cheer. But you forget, you've always needed me. No, I said firmly. I've always needed a roof for my children, and I provided it by paying for this house when you couldn't. You're the one who needed me. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Sign the papers, Chloe, or you'll what? I asked, my voice sharper now. Smear me on Facebook again? Because I've already got screenshots. Dozens of them. And my attorney has them too. Their faces flickered. Anger, panic, disbelief. I stood, pushing the chair back slowly. You can throw your tantrums. You can lie online. You can wave fake papers in my face. But I'm done bowing to you. Ethan and Sophie had come into the kitchen quietly, their wide eyes fixed on the scene. I turned just enough to see them and soften my voice. Go upstairs, kids. It's okay. They obeyed, but not before Ethan gave me a tiny nod, a show of support from a boy forced to grow up too fast. When they were gone, I faced my mother and sister again. I'm not signing, I said. Not today, not ever. And the next time you try to push me out, remember this. I have proof, and proof doesn't scare. I gathered the papers from the table, not to keep them, but to show how little power they held, and dropped them back down in a neat pile. This house isn't just yours, I said quietly. It's mine too, and I won't let you erase me. With that, I turned and walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. That night, I sat at the small desk in the basement, my planner open, my hands steady. Step 4, prepare for legal filing. Janet had already connected me with an attorney she trusted, a woman named Ms. Harding who specialized in property disputes. Over the phone, I told her everything, the down payment, the forged eviction notice, the smear campaign. She listened quietly, then said, You have more than enough, Chloe. They've crossed lines that courts don't ignore. We can file for an injunction. You'll be protected, and they'll have to answer to a judge. Her words lifted a weight off my shoulders I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. For the first time, the fight wasn't just survival, it was strategy. But even as relief washed through me, fear crept in too. Legal battles meant time, money, exposure. And Margaret and Vanessa weren't above making things messy. I tucked Sophie and Ethan in, kissed their foreheads, and whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. You're safe. We'll be okay. Nobody's going to take us away. Then I sat in the dark basement, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled footsteps of my mother pacing above. 2 days later, the storm broke. Vanessa launched another wave online. This time not just Facebook posts, but videos. Her face filled the screen, crocodile tears streaming as she painted herself as the dutiful daughter forced to clean up her reckless sister's mess. She's been violent, Vanessa said, voice trembling. She threatened Mom. We're scared for our safety. The video spread like wildfire, shared in neighborhood groups, whispered about at the grocery store. And this time, it wasn't just words. She'd attached blurry photos, pictures of me mid-argument, my hands raised in frustration, my mouth open mid-shout, frozen moments stripped of context, twisted into a portrait of aggression. I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. Margaret appeared in the background of one clip, looking small, frail, her voice quivering as she said, I don't want to lose my home to my own daughter. It was a performance, a carefully staged act, and people were falling for it. Even Janet called, her voice tight. We're saving everything, Chloe. Every frame, every word. But I won't lie. This is ugly. They're trying to break you before court. I looked at my children sitting on the couch, their faces pale as they scrolled on their own devices, seeing classmates share Vanessa's video. Mom, Sophie whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Why are they saying you're scary?" I gathered her into my arms, holding her tight. Because when people are afraid of the truth, they make up lies. But lies don't last, sweetheart. The truth always comes out. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me, a clarity, a resolve sharper than any fear. Margaret and Vanessa weren't just attacking me. They were attacking Ethan and Sophie, trying to stain their memories, their sense of who their mother was. That I couldn't allow. I pulled out my phone, opened the folder labeled Evidence, and stared at the hundreds of files I had collected. This wasn't just ammunition, this was my shield, my sword, my story, and I was done playing defense. The showdown wasn't coming, it had already begun. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and paper, a blend of cleaning solution and the weight of decisions made inside its walls. I walked through the wide double doors with Ethan and Sophie at my side, Janet just behind us, her steady presence, like a hand at my back. Miss Harding met us near the elevators, dressed in a navy suit, her expression calm and controlled. She handed me a thin folder. "Final copy," and she said quietly, "You know your truth, Chloe. Just tell it." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. We entered courtroom 2B, where the benches creaked under the weight of curious neighbors and a handful of familiar faces from the HOA. The gossip had drawn them here like moths to a flame. At the front, Margaret sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face pale and solemn. Vanessa sat beside her, eyes sharp, lips pressed into a line of false courage. They didn't look at me when I entered. The judge, a woman with silver hair pulled into a bun, adjusted her glasses and called the case to order. "Walker versus Walker," she said evenly. The irony of hearing my family name split against itself wasn't lost on me. Ms. Harding began with the documents, methodical, precise. She laid out the mortgage slips, the bank transfers, the $38,000 down payment drawn from my account. Each page slid onto the table like another stone in a wall they couldn't climb. "These records," Ms. Harding said firmly, "establish Ms. Chloe Walker as a legal co-owner of the property. She contributed significantly to its purchase. Any attempt to evict her or her children without due process is unlawful." The judge examined the pages, her brow furrowing slightly as she flipped through. Then came the forged eviction notice. Ms. Harding held it up with gloved fingers, as though even touching it might stain her skin. This was delivered to my client, as though it were official. But the county clerk's office has confirmed. This seal is fraudulent, the formatting incorrect, and the clerk's name misspelled. This is, at minimum, a deliberate misrepresentation. At worst, criminal forgery. Gasps rippled through the benches. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa leaned forward, whispering furiously into her ear. The judge raised one eyebrow. "Do you dispute this document is forged?" Margaret opened her mouth, but no sound came. Vanessa jumped in, voice sharp. We thought it was real. Someone must have given it to us. We didn't know." The judge's gaze silenced her mid-sentence. Ms. Harding wasn't finished. She clicked a remote, and the monitor at the side of the courtroom lit up with screenshots. Vanessa's Facebook posts filled the screen, captions calling me a freeloader, accusing me of neglect. Photos of Ethan and Sophie in our old rental twisted into false evidence. This, Ms. Harding said, her tone icy, was broadcast to hundreds of people in their community, repeatedly, each statement defamatory, each photo stripped of context, and each one shared, liked, and commented on, causing lasting harm to my client and her children. My stomach knotted as the words scrolled across the monitor, but then Ethan, sitting 2 rows back with Sophie, squeezed my hand. His grip was steady, reminding me that this wasn't just my fight. It was his, too. Vanessa shot up from her chair. "She's twisting it. Chloe's always been unstable." The judge's gavel struck once, sharp and final. "Sit down, Ms. Vanessa." The room fell silent again. Then it was my turn. I walked to the front, my legs trembling but my voice clear. For years, I began softly, I believed that if I stayed quiet, if I worked harder, if I didn't make waves, maybe I'd earn peace in my own family. I thought survival was enough. But then my children were dragged into this. Their room taken, their names smeared, their memories used against them. I looked at the judge, then at the rows of faces watching me. I'm not perfect, but I am their mother. I have worked every double shift, every holiday, every sleepless night for them, and I will not let anyone, even my own blood, erase that. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Then the judge leaned back, adjusting her glasses. I have heard enough. Her ruling came swift, like a blade cutting through the fog. The evidence overwhelmingly supports Ms. Chloe Walker's co-ownership of the property. Any attempt to evict her is invalid. Furthermore, the forged document and online defamation constitute malicious actions. I am granting Chloe Walker sole occupancy rights until further proceedings. Custody of the children remains undisturbed. As for the defamatory material, counsel may pursue damages in civil court. Her gavel struck again. Case adjourned. The sound rang like thunder. Margaret's face crumpled. Vanessa sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, her carefully constructed performance unraveling before the eyes of the community. I turned, not gloating, not triumphant, just steady. Ethan and Sophie were already on their feet, their arms open. I pulled them close, breathing in the scent of their hair, their warmth anchoring me in a moment I would never forget. Janet smiled, her eyes glinting with quiet pride. You did it, Chloe. You didn't just survive. You won. That night, the house felt different, not because the walls had changed or the air smelled sweeter, but because the weight had lifted. The basement was no longer exile. It was just another room. The upstairs, no longer forbidden, was ours again. I tucked Ethan and Sophie into their beds, real beds, back where they belonged. Sophie clutched her stuffed rabbit. Ethan grinned up at me, his eyes bright. You kept your promise, Mom, he whispered. You said we wouldn't have to leave. Tears pricked my eyes as I kissed his forehead. And I'll keep saying it, we're home. When the house finally grew quiet, I sat at my desk with my old leather planner. I flipped through the pages filled with scribbled notes, lists, and reminders. Step 1, gather proof. Step 2, make a plan. Step 3, never let them take from us again. Step 4, prepare for legal filing. And now, Step 5, rebuild. Because survival wasn't enough anymore. We deserved more than survival. We deserved life. And we were going to live it, together, free, and unafraid. Chloe's story reminds us that family doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means standing firm even when the people closest to you turn against you. Through courage, patience, and proof, she protected her children and reclaimed her dignity. And that's the heart of it. Love isn't just soft words, it's the steady choice to fight for what matters. If this story spoke to you, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, your voice, your truth, will always matter.